Alrighty. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the midweek program at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake. I'm the education assistant here at the Arboretum. Today, we're on the perennial border because we are doing a program on April gardening tasks, things you can do in the month of April in your own garden, things that we're focused on in our garden here that you can focus in your own garden and garden along with us at home. It's a lot of fun. We've got Tim Alderton, our research technician, and Greg Paige, our Director of Horticulture, here with us to give you that program. And so, with the announcements out of the way, I'd like to get started with this April gardening task. Tim and Greg, what had you got going for us in the garden?
Greg is going to start.
So we're out in the heat, and right on cue, the train is coming by. I did not get the memo that today was shorts day. All three of my compadres are wearing short pants. I've been out at our research nursery on tractors and on my hands and knees in the blazing sun. So I'm still dressed from that endeavor and that journey. But it's light, it's loose. I feel good, and it's good to be out in the garden. Things are blooming and growing. What we wanted to talk to y'all today about was this is something that we're doing right now. We're weeding and editing. And sometimes those two things can be the same thing. So I'm going to talk about some weeds, plants that are in your garden that are truly weeds. You didn't plant them there. They may or may not have escaped by your doings and your hands. Tim is going to talk about some things that he's been wanting to do for a long time, and he was feverishly, with a lot of vim and vigor and extreme prejudice yesterday, ripping stuff out, reclaiming the garden, and adding some new things to it. So he's going to talk to you about that and kind of the reasons and the whys behind that. So all of us deal with weeds in our garden. Now's a good time to do that because our perennials are coming up. They're going to be pretty much delineated and look different from most of our weeds. Weeds have been coming up in some cases all winter, but things are really getting excited about the rain and the heat. So I'm going to show you a couple things that I found right behind me that I'm sure you deal with in your gardens. And we're going to start with my all-time favorite weed, and it's a little bit wilted, and I don't feel bad about it at all because I hate this plant. This is our friend Oxalis, and it's a really bad weed. Sometimes it comes in with pots that you have. Sometimes it comes in from your lawn, but it's something that spreads by rhizomes. It also has these seed pods that when the seed pods are ripe and you touch them, they explode and they go in 500 directions, including up your nose and in your eye holes. So horrible weed. I'm glad it's getting punished by the heat, but this is something that I've spent years of my life pulling out at every single garden that I work at. I hate this weed, and we all have to deal with this. Another one that's pretty common is another wilty mess. This is a geranium, and Carolina geranium is the common name. I'm not going to throw Latin at you. Tim knows that, and I'll let him chime in if he wants to. But this one's pretty easy to pull up by hand. The oxalis is a little bit harder, but this is pretty easy to delineate. It has a leaf on it because it is a geranium. It looks like it's something that's supposed to be there, but in a lot of cases it's not. This is a situation where one of those things does not look like the other. It's pretty easy to pull out. If you see this coming into your liriope, it's pretty distinct that this guy should not be there. So pretty easy to pull out by hand. A hitchhiker on that, which is another one that I hate because it comes up in the grass, is wild onion.
I don't know what, it's an allium, yeah, I don't even know the species.
It's an allium. I've heard people call it wild garlic.
Yeah.
It has a distinct odor to it. It's hard to pull out because it forms these little bulblets, and if you break off at the bulblet, that guy's going to keep on trucking and causing you much mayhem and anger in the garden. And last but not least, I've completely lost track of what this was.
Henbit.
Henbit, another weed that this thing does not look like the others. Early spring, late winter, you see it come up quite a bit.
Here's some that aren't deep.
Here's some
it's
fresh,
hydrated.
And it's got that purple flower on it. This is something that when I had it in my lawn, I let it do its thing because the bees actually liked it, and I can tolerate that kind of stuff in my lawn. But again, not terribly hard to pull out, not as aggressive as our friend Oxalis. And two woody things that have become a problem. This is our native Virginia creeper, and it's often confused for poison ivy, but it's not. It doesn't have or fall into that category of leaves of 3. It's got leaflets that are 5 or 6 and sometimes more than that. Pretty easy to distinguish from poison ivy. Spreads underground, and we broke off a piece that's going to continue to do its thing in the garden, but you can give it a bad day at least by pulling it out. And finally, it's not a new weed, but it's new to a lot of people, and it's becoming a really bad urban problem. Ampelopsis, common name is porcelain berry. It has a really pretty berry on it. Early fall?
Yeah.
Early fall, and the name fits the description. They look like little porcelain balls, turquoise blue, sky blue, purple. It's actually quite attractive, but it's an absolutely horrible weed. Birds will eat those berries and drop them through your borders along your fence line. And it's one of those things that when you see it, it's already escaped and it's doing lots of damage by spreading around your garden. We're not going to get into particulars of herbiciding and recommending that. There are lots of things out there that you can use to control those. One of our favorites is this guy. This is Hori Hori, Japanese soil knife. It's good for rooting things out by hand. That's the way that we recommend getting rid of most of your weeds. The only advice I want to spread about herbicides is read the label for what you're using so that you get the right thing. Timing is important. On a day like today, if you were to spray an herbicide, herbicides do something called volatilize. They turn from liquid to gas, and those gases will move around the garden. And I've seen trees that have been damaged by those clouds of herbicide that go up. So over 80 degrees, usually not a good idea to do. We're not going to recommend different types of things to use. And be careful of the organics. I've been told that vinegar, and I've seen vinegar sold as an organic herbicide. Vinegar actually can burn you if it's used incorrectly. And a lot of times it's such a powerful destructor of plants, you kill the top and not the roots. Don't pour boiling water on weeds, because if you get that in yourself or on the plant you're trying to keep, it's going to cause lots of problems. Same thing applies with fire. You can buy weeders that are built and hosed into a propane tank. They're a lot of fun to use, but very, very dangerous, and often you just flash burn the foliage, don't kill the root, and things come back. So cultural things, use our extension brochures. Sophia told me about a really good one that I've already forgotten.
It's a turf.
It's a turf grass extension site through NC State. We'll try to put it on into the YouTube at some point. Really, really good research. It's not just turf grass weeds. It's a good weed identification in general, and helps you figure out what you have. And before you need to pull it, need to spray it, need to do anything to it, it's always good to do a little bit of research. You've got time on your side. Weeds aren't going to go crazy in a quick span of time. So that's the gist of weeds. The other side of right now is editing, rejuvenating, moving things out that may have gotten too aggressive, moving things out that may have moved from the back of a border to the front of the border, or vice versa. And I'm going to let Tim talk to y'all about that.
Okay. And your oxalis, you didn't say the obvious thing. You can eat that oxalis. It's nice in a salad.
There's better things to eat.
It tastes like it has the same chemical as rhubarb. And for a northerner like me, I love rhubarb. And it doesn't like it down here. So just that tang. Anyways, but I do also grow oxalis as ornamentals in the border.
There are a couple good
There's
ones.
a bunch of good ones for that.
There's a bunch of good
so
ones.
not all oxalis are bad. So anyways, for me, I've been working here in the border for actually the last several weeks. Greg doesn't even, he realizes I've been doing it, but I've been going through here a lot, trying to get ahead of things. Since we've had an early spring this year down here in North Carolina, I've been able to get in and identify things that, well, the weeds, which there's still lots of them, and also the desirable plants, but some of the desirable plants that have moved, and we don't always take into account that plants are, especially herbaceous plants, typically aren't really stationary. We think of a tree and it stays where it's put, but it's really, those herbaceous plants, they actually send stolons out. They may layer themselves, and that actually happens with a lot of shrubs as well. So they end up moving throughout a landscape and not just in that one spot where you originally put them. And they may not be happy in that original spot you put them, but they end up going somewhere else. But so anyways, we're here in actually the hot section of our border, which I haven't gotten to as much as I'd like to, but there's some editing it's very easy to see in here, and weeding. A weed that Greg didn't mention, which is probably one of my top 5 nightmares, and I'm not in the right spot here. There we go. I'm hitting the edge of my concrete border here, but there is a bulb in here. Ooh. And this is, I would love to have that allium that you put in here, because I can get rid of that. This is a South American cousin of the allium. This is a Nothoscordum species. I believe it's fragrance if I looked it up right, but it gets a nice white flower. It doesn't have the smell of allium or onions, but the flowers are also fragrant, but on this species. But we also have a native species, bivalve, which is smaller and a little bit not so nasty, but this has gone like a brush fire through the border in places over the last several years. And we've tried sifting it out of the soil. The only way I found it, you'd have to dig it out, and you have to dig it out repeatedly. We don't have a selective chemical to kill it, and Roundup won't kill it, for instance. And of course that vinegar won't, and that hot water won't. So anyways, this is one of my nightmare plants that I have in this border. It kind of looks like garlic chives when it's in flower. And so it's a good masquerading as that. So anyways, that's one I've been sifting out of the soil here in certain spots. My volunteers, some new volunteers this morning helped me go through about a 10-foot by 10-foot section up here this morning, which I was so happy for that. But anyways, back to editing. I don't know if you can see how close, some of the plants that are here. There is my favorite Nothoscordum, but there's this little leaf thing here. I'm hoping most people here in the South anyways recognize these. These are cannas. They were planted 15 feet from here several years ago, before I was here, and they have slowly migrated their way to within 3 inches of the front of the border. This is a 6 or 8 foot tall canna. It's not really appropriate for the front of the border. So it has ventured to a place that it says, I'm saying it can't stay there. I have to get rid of it. Another one here, I have it goes by various names. This is canna striata or canna Bengal tigers, Pretoria. They're all pretty much the same. And again, this started over there 10 feet away. It's not as bad. I don't mind it as much, but I need to take these in. And so this is a perfect time. Now that they're just starting to push up, they don't have excessive amounts of foliage, so they're easier to deal with than when you wait until midsummer and think, I'm gonna get to that and dig that out, and I'll still have to do some editing, but I'm gonna get some of these out now. It's really easy, that canna, you can pass these on. I really actually do like this canna, but I just don't want it in this location. And very easy to get those out.
We can reuse these someplace else. Sometimes we let volunteers take them.
Yep.
So
we might put them on our plant cart sometimes too.
Right. It's a good time to, that's where the tradition of pass along plants in the South has come from, is this process in the spring of going through and editing.
Other things, that grows by a rhizome. Another thing, this was an ironweed, which we have had various ironweeds or vernonias in this border for decades.
8 feet tall.
This is not one of the biggest ones. I have one that I really like over here, Jonesboro Giant. Gigantea Jonesboro Giant. Anyways, it gets 12. This is another one. It's actually, once it gets going in the summer, you need an iron bar to get it out of the ground. It does not want to come out. Right now, you can get in here, you can take them up. They're pretty distinct. I have no problem taking them up at this time of the year. And they self-sow. They're a self-sowing one. They aren't running like the cannas. So it's different ways of them moving through the landscape. And anyways, so now's a wonderful time to get that. You'll learn about the plants that you planted in your border is a great thing. Learn about them at different times of the year to identify them, and then you can see what's going on there, especially at this time of the year as things are emerging, before they've all grown together and it becomes just a jungle and it's like, I don't know where to start. And that's normally what I get to here. I don't get a chance to work in this in the spring, and I don't know where to start in here in the summer. And or it leaves it just the biggest, it looks like a crater in the border when I do get in here in the summer. Now I can get in here and it'll just slowly ease in and everything will come up. But I have some other things in here. I mean, penstemon will come up in the front of the border. It's a self-sowing perennial as well. It's not as obtrusive, say, as the Vernonia, and it's actually fairly easy to get out. So these years ago, this would have been from a strain called Husker's Red, and there's Nothoscordamin mixed in here too, so the perfect clump to get out. They self-sow throughout the border. They are nice, but I don't want them, again, 3 inches from the front of the border. This gets to about 2 feet or so when it's in flower. White to pale pink flowers against the dark burgundy foliage on that. So another one there. I don't know, let's see, that's a dead shoot there. That's wonderful. Some things I don't mind so much, but I can't find them because they're in the Nothoscorda, and doing this in the canna, that is, or things like the Salvia lyrata, probably one called Volcano. It's a purple leaf form of it. I can then find these things by doing this sifting through here. Occasionally, though, there is something I want to keep that also doesn't necessarily, it didn't start here. I found, let's see if I can get a little closer, get rid of a few cannas here as you can see it. There's a really nice, I didn't plant this eucomis, so a pineapple lily of all things that has popped up here. I saw this last summer. It was a big one, about this tall, really nice, majestic plant. It's not in a bad spot. I can leave that here, but I'll make it so it's more visible. It was really hidden among a ton of stuff here last year when I first noticed it. It flowered beautifully. It is just a plain green one, and it's not like sparkling burgundy, but it was just a really nice form, and it is solid in there, right there. So again, this is editing. You can come in and take out what you don't want. You can leave some here and there, and you can leave them in hopes to move them somewhere else and relocate them. That's what I'm trying to do here. It's like I leave what I might want and get rid of what I don't want and fill in.
One of the things Tim mentioned to me before we started was it helps to have a good tool to do that. I had the Hori Hori for small weeds. Tim really likes his cultivating fork.
Our soil here is terrible, and it's you can't dig
heavy
in here.
Yeah, this is not your everyday. I was going to mention
you might
that
want
too.
a shovel.
It's not your everyday nice red Carolina clay. This is years and years of compost, leaf litter, all that kind of stuff. This is ideal, but even in our horrible clay soil, Tim's cultivating forks are super nice. This is a British one because it's got the wooden handle. Typically, they last for a long time.
They get bent regardless what you do.
They can get bent. This is not pressed metal. This is all forged, so it's solid steel. You can do a lot with these. This gets around something like that, doing the least amount of damage to pop things out. This is one of my favorite tools for moving perennials and stuff. They also make perennial spades, smaller forks and things, but that's a good one, and that's good for cleaning up afterwards too. But this is nice.
We'll just make sure you don't drop that one back in there. Other thing, right behind me, I was joking earlier, I don't know if you can see what's behind me. Earlier I did a little bit of trimming on this. This is a Yucca aloifolia variegata, and what some would say a woody lily. It's actually very woody. But it's a monocot. So I took the handsaw to this, or actually a pole saw. That was very convenient. The common name of Yucca aloifolia is Spanish bayonets, and if I don't watch out, I might get stabbed in the back just like by a bayonet. I
did that a few times yesterday.
Yeah, you don't watch out and it gets you. But anyways, I was able to bring it back in earlier before all this other stuff started to get going. So it was a perfect time. And now I'm able to get in here and do some work a little bit easier and see what's in here. There's some mums. I'm going to take them in. I can just replant a small piece of them at this time of the year, and they will be a big mass by the end of summer. Some of the penstemon, I was doing the ones up here in the foreground, but some back here, this is actually a perfect spot for them in front of the yucca. Gives it a good background. Here is, let's see if I can get this out. Let's see here. This is the ampelopsis that we were talking about. Or the porcelain vine.
It looks like that's been pulled a couple times.
Yes, and the spade fork does a good job on it. You can find them at this time of the year, and it's really great when it gets into the yucca aloifolia and it layers in among it, and that's the fun part, getting it back out of there. But like I said, get in your border if you have a border or any garden right now. You know, any place you have perennials, look at it. If things are starting to grow together, do some editing. This is, like I said, a perfect time, especially for the summer growing ones. Like I talked about last month for hellebores. It's getting a little late to do major stuff with them. Not that you can't do it. They will like it a little bit better when it's cooler. They're starting to go to sleep now. But those things that are coming into active growth right now, this is a perfect time to get in here and manipulate them, move them around. You can get rid of the ones you don't want or relocate the ones that are kind of out of their original plan that you wanted. Keep them from taking over their neighbors. I do like some plants. I have in other parts of the garden we have mountain mint. It is wonderful fragrance. Per pollinator plant, but it can be a little bit of a thug. And if you want to cover an area, it's wonderful. But if you don't want it to take over small shrubs or even a mid-sized shrub, you might have to get in there and prune, or that is, dig some of it out. And a lot of these herbaceous things, you have to take that into account. They're fast-moving. A lot of them are early successional species, so they do really well when they are transplanted. That really invigorates them and makes them do well in your garden. So they don't necessarily have to be standing still. Like I was saying, plants are meant to move. Some things, I was saying, it kind of walk through the garden that would be layering plants. I saw a fellow this morning who was saying his rosemary was kind of going downhill, and I said, where do you have it? And he says it was kind of in a contained spot. In the wild, rosemary is probably going to lean over, and it's going to root in and start here. The original plant's going to die out. When we contain those into one little spot by pruning and whatnot, they aren't always happy. You sometimes have to start over, get rid of that original plant, take that layer and move it. If you want it in that spot, move it back to that original spot. And that's something you can do at this time of the year without too much damage to the plant. So is that about enough time ready for questioning?
We are ready for questions.
Okay.
Let's do questions.
Okay, so we got one from Judy. She says, how do you eliminate poison ivy?
Carefully. Greg can tell you that now.
I have had
it's sick and you have someone else do it.
I got poison ivy here a couple weeks ago because I wasn't paying attention. I mean, he wasn't here to warn me. But if you've got it in your garden, that's a definite thing I would recommend using herbicide on. And one thing that you can do is get yourself some rubber gloves that are relatively thick. Get some herbicide on a sponge and touch the leaves of the poison ivy with the gloves and the wet sponge just on the poison ivy. Don't squeeze it, let it drip on other things, because the foamy drops of herbicide are going to kill whatever it touches. But if you gently coat that, you can get it on the leaves and it'll help kill it. Another thing you can do is use a paintbrush and just use that paintbrush to paint it on the leaves. They used to make a product that already had that kind of thing built in. I don't know if they still do or not, but it works pretty good. Another thing you can do is take a pair of gloves, pull it out by hand, and throw the poison ivy and the gloves away. And that way you've got the whole thing out by the roots. But keep an eye on it, because if you break a piece of the root off, it's going to come back. Birds also eat the fruit. They'll drop their fruit in different places. That's one of those things that if you see it coming out of your holly, it's probably been in there for a long time. It's going to require more care. And there are a lot of people that aren't allergic to it. Don't find out, because the repercussions are no fun. But wear gloves. You can pull it out, but throw the gloves away. Don't reuse the gloves. I've gotten poison ivy.
Don't put them through the wash.
Don't put them in the wash. There's an oil that the poison ivy exudes you can't wash it out. They also make a product called Technu that if you know that you've touched it, and in a short enough span of time with really hot water, you lather up with that Technu, it breaks that oil down. If it brushed your arm, rub your arm down with it, it actually works really, really good. If you do get it, the best thing I've ever used to kind of abate the orgasmic itching is collided oatmeal. That works really, really good to abate it. And there's a whole host of products out there that work with that. So good luck and be careful.
Yeah, and I'd like to add something about, you were talking about herbicides earlier and how it's very important to read the label. And I think this is critical for dealing with perennial weeds with herbicides because they offer a range on how much you should mix up with it. And if you mix too high a concentration, then you will only destroy the foliage before the plant has a chance to translocate that herbicide down to the roots where it will kill the roots and kill the plant. So if the concentration's too high, you're just pruning the plant, chemically speaking.
Chemically burning is what that is.
And some of them, some of the herbicides out there are only for that purpose, and they will burn. We always mention glyphosate, and everyone worries about that, but it translocates through the plant, so it moves through the plant. It just doesn't burn the surface that gets sprayed.
And adding to that great comment, timing is also crucial. A lot of perennial weeds. And if you think about things like burning bush, privet, ligustrums, those things that have escaped, fall's a good time to treat those because those plants are bulking up their root systems for the winter. They're taking everything they can get down into their root system. So early to mid-fall is a good time to treat those problem woody weeds because they're going to put a lot of that energy they're taking and everything's going to go to the root system, and you're going to have a much better effect with herbicide kill at that point.
Wonderful. And I'm not going to skip anybody's question for sure, but we did have another question that's sort of similar in the same vein and just as annoying. How do you get rid of bamboo?
You were talking about that at lunch.
Yeah.
I've done it a couple of ways too. But.
Bamboo is really, really hard because it has a very deep tuber. I was part of a trial at my last job with that in mind, and we were injecting just regular Roundup into the stems. That way it goes straight into the root systems and had really good success without a lot of chemical. Unfortunately, chemicals are probably the only means to control bamboo. You can't burn it. You can't cover it with plastic. You can't put salt on it. You can't pour hot water on it. That's a definite chemical thing. We've got a patch here that keeps growing up into one of our transformers and shorting the power out. And Duke Power had to come in and cut it down, but it's going to come back with reckless abandon. So we're going to talk to them about maybe doing some kind of a chemical treatment. That's something that's worth a Google. Again, we don't want to hawk products and give that advice. I would look online for the best way, and there's some extension publications that point that out. But that too is all about timing.
Okay. So Catherine's asking, is there any reason to fertilize your herbaceous perennials now?
Oh, yeah, definitely. You could fertilize. My soil here is actually pretty good. We don't do too much fertilizing here. But if you want to, you could put, when you're dividing it, you could put like a nice slow release fertilizer on them for the summer. You'll get a lot of more bang for your buck probably on some of the things at this time of the year because they're going to immediately start picking it up. Say if you're doing salvias, which are Salvia garnetica, that one spreads like a weed, but yes. Those Salvia farinaceae I have down here, it'll pick that right up. It'll start growing. It'll make it flower like gangbusters, for instance. But yeah,
not heavy nitrogen.
No,
Nitrogen's going to encourage the foliage to grow, and you're going to be less likely to have flowers. That applies to flowering shrubs and everything else. We always tell you to do a soil sample to see what you have and work from that. This is the best thing you can put in your garden.
That's why I don't have to fertilize.
Leaf compost. It's gold. I've seen more good effects from that on woody plants perennials than pretty much anything, because all that organic matter retains moisture, all the microbes in it, the organic matter. It's just really, really good for pretty much anything that ails your garden.
There are some plants, though, that like to live a lean life.
Yes.
And I can't grow them in this border anymore because it's too rich, for instance.
A lot of grasses, blue stem likes lean soil.
Lavenders.
A
lot of Mediterranean plants.
Some of the sedges, things that are Mediterranean in nature. But for the most part, it's an easy thing to boost your garden soil up.
Okay, so you've been talking about moving perennials around. Somebody asked specifically, can hardy cyclamen be moved now?
Actually, I would probably wait on those. They're starting to go to sleep.
Sure.
And you could move them, but they're just going to go to sleep. But fall, when they're just starting to put out new leaves, that is on things like heterofolium. Coum it comes later, but heterofolium is the most common one we grow around here. And yeah, I would probably wait till fall to move it. And that's when they will actually seeds will start germinating on them in the fall too. So that's another indication of when that plant is a good time to move it, is when the seedlings start to come. So naturally. Anyways.
Awesome. Okay, so Carolyn's asking, best way to renew and manage vines growing on a pergola?
It depends more of what kind of vine it is to some extent.
Okay.
Say clematis, for instance, there's 3 or 4 different ways to prune depending on what kind of clematis it is, for instance.
They're worse than hydrangeas.
It is, yeah. So some you cut almost to the ground. Others you just take out the dead or just trim them minorly. It depends on what plant she's doing.
She's got crossvine and Carolina jessamine.
Okay, crossvine and Carolina jessamine. I would probably prune it right after they're done flowering.
Yep.
So in the next month, probably. They should be finishing up pretty soon. And you can be pretty hard on those and they will recover quickly because you're leaving the root system there. It's all underground. That's going to reflush and come back up. So yeah.
Is that something you could do more than once a year, or is that?
If you had to, but yeah,
Usually
being that
you
don't have to, but you wouldn't want to do it too much later than mid to late summer, because those are flowering in the winter, spring, which we had a question last week about those plants that flower on older new growth. Those tend to flower on the previous season shoots. So I wouldn't go much later than say July or August, late July, August here. To do a major pruning. You could do some minor pruning just to keep the shape then.
Same thing with fertilizer.
Yeah.
Not something that's nitrogen heavy.
Yeah.
Something slow release is probably better. And mulch around the base of it.
Yeah.
Monitor the water, all that kind of stuff.
Alrighty. Laura's asking, is it safe to prune back clematis branches that seem to be dead? Most of the plant has fully come back and is
Yes,
blooming.
definitely.
Well, I think we've reached that point now where if you have some things that look burnt by frost, you can start gently. I don't want to jinx us.
Yeah, I think we're safe this week, and they're only calling for 41.
I think we're out. I think we're out of the woods, but you're not going to get that out of us today. But clematis, whatever side of the fence you are.
And they are super hardy. They are not going to get damaged. So if that wood isn't sprouting yet, it's probably gone. And it could be that it is one of the ones that likes to be cut back hard, and they will often die back on their own. Or one of the ones that's a newer hybrid that's a cross between an herbaceous one and a climbing one, and they tend to die back, but come back very vigorously.
I've done some work with the Clematis Society, and they've got a really good website that's worth a Google that kind of explains that and the different ones and the timing to prune those, and also places that grow them where you can nurseries that specialize in them as well. So that's a source worth looking for.
Okay. Well, that looks like that's all the questions we've got in the chat today.
Okay.
So thank you so much, Tim and Greg, for doing this little chat for us.
We can go back into air conditioning now.
Yes, we can. Absolutely. And thank you all for joining us today. We will be back next Wednesday at 3 o'clock as usual, and Greg will be talking to us about, well, yeah, you. It's privacy through planting. We're talking about screening
hedging,
plants.
remember? Oh, yeah.
Hedges and yeah, for sure. It's going to be good. Greg has a homework assignment, so we're going to see how well he does. Make sure you tune in next week to grade him. We'll see y'all then. Take care.